I'm afraid this week's vlog's going to be a bit of a lazy one. I've actually got something to read from, which my psychologist gave to me about the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. So I've picked up a snack from the bakery. I've got a pecan plat. The experiment looks at the effects of starvation on healthy people. So they took 36 men, and for 3 months they just let them eat normally, maintain their healthy weight. Then for 6 months they starved them. They put them on half, I think, the calories that they were on before. And then for the final 3 months they basically put them through refeeding. And I learned about this experiment when I was about 19, when I was in hospital. And honestly, it like blew my mind, because I just thought a lot of what I was experiencing was just me, you know, or at least just my eating disorder. But seeing that actually healthy individuals put through starvation experience the same things, like if I can actually get to a healthy weight again and eat consistently and not restrict my food like these men did, like I can recover too, and I can get back to normal eating, socializing, emotional patterns, what have you. So I'm just going to eat this and then I'll read this thing that my psychologist has given me. It's too hot, I need the aircon on. I actually think it's just been baked, it's still a bit warm.
Yum.
Okay, let me get straight on and read the thing. So it's broken into sections to show how like restriction and starvation impacted like food and eating behaviours, binge eating, emotional changes, social and sexual changes, cognitive changes, physical activity, and then the significance of the study. Oh my god, I don't know how long this is going to take. Attitudes and behaviour related to food and eating. The men's change in relationship to food was one of the most striking results of the experiment. They found it increasingly difficult to concentrate on more normal things and became plagued by persistent thoughts of food and eating. Food became a principal topic of conversation, of reading, and of daydreams. Sound familiar? No wonder, honestly, these men are starving. Their brains are just prioritising food, food, food. They don't care about socialising or hobbies or interests or work or anything. All they want is food. So their brain is just going, please, please, please go and eat. I'm just going to make you think about, fantasise about, daydream about food all the time. Definitely sounds familiar. Many men began reading cookbooks and collecting recipes, whilst others became interested in collecting various kitchen utensils. One man even began rummaging through rubbish bins in the hope he would find something that he might need. The desire to hoard has been seen in both people and animals that are deprived of food. Although food had been of little interest to the men prior to the experiment beginning, almost 40% of the men mentioned cooking as part of their post-experiment plans. Some actually did change their careers to a career focused on food once the experiment was over. The men's eating habits underwent remarkable changes during the study. Much of the day was now spent planning how they would eat their allocated food. Plus, in order to prolong the enjoyment of their food eaten, it would take them vastly longer amounts of time to eat a meal. They would eat in silence and they would devote their total attention to the consumption of their food. The subjects of the study were often caught between conflicting desires to gulp their food down ravenously and to consume it slowly so that the taste and smell of each morsel of food would be fully appreciated. I did a vlog recently about weird eating habits and mentioned things like cutting food up tiny, spreading it out, just basically trying to maximise the amount of food you're able to eat, because you're in starvation, your body and your brain are just going, please, please, please go and eat this food. These men had starvation imposed upon them. But if we, as part of our eating disorder, are imposing starvation upon ourselves and restricting our intake and saying like, no, you're not allowed to go and eat this food, we're going to be in conflict between eating disorder saying, no, you're not allowed to eat this food. Totally normal human response to that of, but oh my God, I want to go and eat this food. So we've got this conflict of like, no, you're not allowed to eat this food, but all I want to do is eat this food. The food you are allowed to eat becomes the biggest event of your day. You plan it all day, you think about it all day, you fantasize over the meals, you cut the food up tiny, try and spread the food out or make it last as long as possible, or some of these men like gulp it down as quickly as possible. Like, sounds very familiar. By the end of the starvation period of the study, the men would dawdle for almost 2 hours over a meal that they previously would have consumed over a matter of minutes. The consumption of tea and coffee increased so much that they had to be limited to 9 cups per day. The use of chewing gum also became excessive and they had to have that limited. Again, that kind of like constant desire to be tasting, eating, being around food, just experiencing or talking about food in some way. Like, I know everyone's different, but for me, any opportunity to go to a supermarket, I would have taken it, and to do a food shop. Like, if I wasn't eating food, I just wanted to be around food or have some involvement with food all the time. During the 12th week refeeding phase of the experiment, most of these abnormal attitudes and behaviours to food persisted. Some of the men had more severe difficulties during the first 6 weeks of refeeding. The free choice of ingredients stimulated creative and experimental playing with food, for example, licking off plates and very poor table manners. But yeah, important to note that even at the end of the refeeding stage, some of them still had weird behaviours and attitudes to food. So yeah, we cannot just say, I'll be recovered at this weight or at this date or when I'm able to eat this food or whatever. Like, it's a human body, it's a messy process, and we can't decide when our bodies are going to be like, okay, I feel safe now, starvation's over. Like, yeah, even after refeeding, it can still impact your life and your attitude to food. Okay, next section, binge eating. During the restrictive phase of the experiment, all the volunteers reported feeling more hungry. While some appeared able to tolerate this fairly well, for others it created intense concern and even became intolerable. It's like, we're all different, right? Several of the men failed to stick to their diet and reported episodes of binge eating followed by self-reproach. While working in a grocery store, one man suffered a complete loss of willpower and ate several cookies, a sack of popcorn and 2 overripe bananas before he could regain control of himself. He immediately suffered a severe emotional upset with nausea, and upon returning to the lab, he vomited. He was self-deprecatory. Oh my god, I actually can't read that word. Depreciatory, expressing disgust and self-criticism. And this guy didn't even have weight concerns, like starvation was completely imposed on him. After about 5 months of refeeding, the majority of the men reported some normalisation of their eating patterns, but for some the difficulties in managing their food persisted. After 8 months, most of the men had returned to normal eating patterns, although a few still had abnormal eating patterns. 8 months, seriously, like, our expectations on recovery are mental. If normal healthy individuals went through semi-starvation for 6 months, like, I don't know how long you've been ill, but I've been ill for a lot longer than 6 months, and then even after 8 months, some of the men still had abnormal eating patterns. One man still reported consuming around 25% more than he did prior to weight loss, and once he started to reduce his food, but he got so hungry he could not stand it. Now, I think eventually all these men do get back to normal, healthy eating habits, a healthy weight that they just maintain without abnormal, odd behaviours, but like... And also everyone's different. Like, some men, their bodies recovered a lot quicker. For others, it took 5 months, 8 months, and then this one poor guy a lot longer still. I'm just gonna have to put the aircon on, I'm getting too hot. The next section's emotional changes. It's important to remember that the subjects were psychologically very healthy prior to the experiment, but most experienced significant emotional changes as a result of semi-starvation. Many experienced periods of depression. Some breathed whilst others experienced protracted depression. The men's tolerance that had prior to starvation been high was replaced by irritability and frequent outbursts of anger. And I've heard that before, actually, that like irritability and just poor resilience to stress is a symptom of starvation. For most subjects, anxiety became more evident. Many of the formerly even-tempered men began biting their nails or smoking if they felt nervous. Both observation and personality testing showed that the individual emotional responses to semi-starvation varied considerably. Some of the volunteers seemed to cope very well, whilst others displayed extraordinary disturbance following weight loss. The next section is social and sexual changes. Most of the volunteers experienced a large shift in their social behaviours. Although originally quite gregarious, who's written this? The men became progressively more withdrawn and isolated. Humour and a sense of friendship and comradeship diminished markedly amidst growing feelings of social inadequacy. Social initiative especially, and sociability in general, underwent a remarkable change. The men became reluctant to plan activities, to make decisions, and to participate in group activities. They spent more and more time alone. It became too much trouble or too tiring to have contact with people. I've done another vlog on isolation. Like, that was huge for me. The iller I got, the more and more I withdrew and became isolated, and yeah, just in my own little food and weight world, and yeah, shut off, basically. The volunteers' social contacts The volunteers' social contacts with women also declined sharply during semi-starvation. Those who continued to see women socially found that the relationships became strained. One man best described his difficulties as follows: I am one of about 3 or 4 who still go out with girls. I fell in love with a girl during the control period, so the 3 months of normal eating and observation. But I see her only occasionally now. It is almost too much trouble to see her even when she visits me in the lab. It requires effort to hold her hand. Entertainment must be tame. If we see a show, the most interesting part of it is contained in the scenes where people are eating. If one of my friends posts like an Instagram story or a Facebook photo or something and they're eating, I will literally like zoom in to see what they're eating. Like, what the fuck? That is not normal. Although kind of good to see that it is normal, really. Like, if your body's gone through restriction and starvation, over obsession and hyper awareness of food is a normal symptom of that. So it's not normal for normal people in everyday life, but if you've gone through severe restriction, like, yeah, I guess then it is a normal response. And it can be improved once like restrictions reversed and you're healthy and eating consistently. One subject graphically stated that he had no more sexual feeling than a sick oyster. During the rehabilitation period, the men's sexual interest was slow to return. Even after 3 months, they judged themselves to be far from normal in this area. However, after 8 months, some or virtually all of the men had recovered their interest in sex. Right, cognitive changes. The volunteers reported impaired concentration, alertness, comprehension, and judgment during semi-starvation. Physical changes. During rehabilitation, the metabolism speed up again. Yay! It's not broken. Especially in those who had the larger increases in food intake. Described being concerned about their increased sluggishness, general flabbiness, and the tendency for fat to accumulate around the stomach and buttocks. Oh my god. These complaints are very similar to those that people with bulimia and anorexia describe as they gain weight. However, here we go, after approximately a year, the men's body fat and muscle levels were back to their pre-experiment levels. A year. Not, I've hit a healthy BMI, why am I not recovered? Or why have I gained most of my weight around my stomach? Or why am I tired or flabby or whatever? Like, a year for the weight to redistribute and normalise. Which is so hard. Like, I am so impatient and I am so intolerant of like fat accumulating around your stomach, for example, and not distributing properly all across your body. Like, I hate it, and I'm just like, I want to fix it. Like, how would I fix it? Back to restriction, and then I'm back in the friggin' starvation cycle. So it's kind of helpful to know that it can take longer, like a year. Oh my god, the patience, but like a year for weight to redistribute and normalise. Okay, physical activity. Some men exercise deliberately at times. Some of them attempted to lose weight by driving themselves through periods of excessive energy in order to obtain increased bread rations or to avoid reduction in rations. This is similar to the practice of many patients who feel that if they exercise strenuously, they can allow themselves a bit more to eat. So interesting, isn't it? And you can learn all about this study online. I think Shell Keys, is that what he's called, actually wrote a book about the experiment. Okay, the significance of the study. As all of the volunteers were psychologically and physically healthy prior to the experiment, all of the symptoms experienced by them can be put down to the period of starvation. It would appear, therefore, that many of the symptoms faced in anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa are a result of the food restriction rather than the illnesses themselves. And certainly not just because of you. And it is important to recognise that these symptoms are not just limited to food and weight, but extend to virtually all areas of psychological and social functioning. It is therefore extremely important that a person with an eating disorder returns to a normal weight, brackets if underweight, to allow these symptoms to reduce significantly or completely, and for both the therapist and the patient to become aware of emotional problems that underlie the eating disorder. It is also important to think how the men's relationship with food was not normal even after they'd returned to eating freely available food. In the short term, they felt out of control with much of their food intake and were unable to identify when they felt hungry or when they felt full. Many of these symptoms continued after they reached a normal weight, and for some took several months and even years to normalise. Years. these men were healthy before they had starvation imposed upon them for a period of 6 months, and for some of them it took years for their symptoms to normalise after they were a healthy weight and eating consistently. It is therefore important for someone recovering from anorexia or bulimia to understand that they cannot just expect that their body will return to being able to regulate food intake on its own. We know that consuming a well-balanced and nutritionally complete food intake spread out over regular points during the day encourages a return of the body's ability to recognise when it's hungry and full. So I hope that's like helpful, interesting. So much of that text just sets off like proper bells? What does it set off? Light bulbs? I don't know. But anyway, I can relate to so many of the symptoms and experiences that the men had, like during restriction and during the refeeding, and the weight gain and odd eating habits, desire to eat everything, the thinking about food all the time, the loss of interest in socializing, the isolation, like, yeah. And now that I'm in recovery and have been for probably a year now actually, and I've been on weight gain and I'm a healthy body weight now, but a lot of my behaviours around food and a lot of the symptoms listed still aren't what I would call normal. So it helps me a lot to think like I do need to keep going and be at my body's healthy point and eating unrestricted and regularly for a good period of time as well, like a fucking year. Not that I'm impatient, but seriously a year before potentially, like before it might sort itself out again. And actually I've put my body through a lot more, to be honest, than these men had to put their bodies through. So I don't know, who knows how long it'll take. So I'm gonna head home now, do these interviews, and then Brendan and I are actually talking about going to a cinema, which Gary Rhodes, the chef, has opened in Dubai, and you can order like dinner whilst you're watching your film. It's got like a little bell for service and a table and stuff. It's really weird, but they properly serve like burgers, fish and chips, nachos. Well, you always get nachos at the cinema. Oh my god, Knickerbocker Glories. Oh my god, a Knickerbocker Glory. But anyway, if I can finish work in time, then we might go for dinner at the cinema, weirdly. And sorry this vlog's been a bit of a lazy one, but once this event's out of the way with work, I'll have a lot more time to think and record proper videos. But lots of love anyway, and I hope everyone has a lovely weekend, and I'll speak to you soon.
Ready?
Yeah, so I'm gonna have kamikaze prawns, salads, skip,
Yeah. One
burger,
ham and fry, and then one burger and one steak sandwich.
and then either sticky toffee pudding or Knickerbocker Glory.
We've got one of each then. One sticky toffee food and one knickerbocker glory.
Okay, yeah, one sticky toffee, one Knickerbocker Glory.
No hot drinks, two of them.
Service button is on the right side if you need something.
Okay. Thank you.
Joy, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Doing the full rounds for the scar.